Hey Goyles and Boyles, has-been YouTuber here. I know I promised a bunch of stuff a few vids back, and you know what? I'm sorry, for real. I know this isn't what you guys were waiting for, but I figured I might as well start doing something more transformative, something of substance and creativity, you know? So let's talk about two silhouettes hitting each other. Armed with wings, the natural evolution of those doodles you used to make as a kid, of two stick figures fighting, and whoever loses at the end gets erased, so the eraser marks kind of make it look like they're getting turned into dust. I wasn't the only one who did that in school, right? First released online in 2008 as a Flash game, the series is primarily focused around combo-based melee combat and a lot of simple platforming. Armed with Wings is primarily known for its striking visual style, depicting characters as simple silhouettes, leaving a lot up to the imagination of the player. Surprise, surprise though, the game's got a lot of lore. Good lore at that. Today we're gonna try and do a sort of base level breakdown of the series, you know, piece by piece. Also, fair warning, I'm not going to be covering Armed with Wings Rearmed because of this, and this. This is just a breakdown of the original Flash games. Alright, so enough with the pretenses, let's just get right into this. Okay, I know technically this isn't the first game in the series chronologically, but, you know, the stuff in Red Moon won't really make much sense without it. Long ago, in the world of Black Mist, a powerful empire led by King Vendir Lord Day rose to prevalence. We don't know the details of his rise or his empire's influence, but we do know one thing. People weren't too happy about it. Eventually, though, a rebellion led by the Lone Warrior and his generals, Quema Tormenta, Smoking Martillo, and Vinsot? However the fuck you pronounce his name, lead a rebellion against the High Lord's empire. It doesn't go so well. After crushing the rebellion, the Lone Warrior is the last man standing, and Vendir mocks his efforts and finally puts him down. And so ends the series. No, but seriously, through means unknown to us at least, the Lone Warrior is resurrected from the dead by the will of Black Mist itself. It's as if the very earth around them is longing for the demise of this corrupt and evil king. The Lone Warrior sets off to bring Vendir to justice, and hilarity ensues. I'm real! After all of that, we see the Lone Warrior encounter a Minotaur of some sort.
You come wide at me again, boy, I'll stick that wrench.
I mean, at least it looks like a Minotaur. The fight is pretty easy, even if it's a little jittery, but that's not the interesting part. This isn't the same man that was cut down in the field by the king. We don't really know how, but this resurrection has given him a massive boost in power, as evidenced by the fact that this big ugly bastard gets slashed into bits, kinda foreshadowing Vendir's upcoming rematch a little bit. Things start heating up though as the Lone Warrior makes his way through the caverns and ravines and other shit towards the actual city of Vendir's rule. Along the way, a whole bunch of fun stuff happens. We get to see some elites, gameplay, some normal soldiers, and whatever's going on here. The fuck is this? A lot of it is rather inconsequential, and more so serves as build-up for the fight with the big man himself. The whole journey has been building to this moment. The last soul of the rebellion, now standing before the king, who seems unusually calm, confident that his abilities, mainly ice magic, will be more than enough to take out the Lone Warrior. He's not really on the money with that one. After going up to the great King Vandir Lorday and promptly decking him in the schnoz and beating the absolute living hell out of him, the lone warrior prepares to finish him off, but Vandir decides now, of all times, to make his escape before he can finally strike him down. Okay, I'm gonna be honest, this one's pretty simple, all things considered, especially when compared to later entries in the series. But honestly, I would argue it was by far the most important, establishing a big turning point that the big series would center around. After the fact, it's pure, it's simple, it's elegant, it's whatever other positive connotations are in the script. It sets up the rest of the series in a pretty simple and fun way, and honestly, I'm all for it. Okay, now before we get into what happened after Vandir's fall, we gotta make a quick detour.
Once a decade, the moon shines red. On that day, we gain its immense power. Can you feel it? With this power, we will seize this damned kingdom and call it our own.
I'd say that explains it pretty well. Red Moon takes place sometime before the events of Armed with Wings, but after the fall of the rebellion. We get to follow a new protagonist named Ivana, and Hawken, who is a bit less than stellar of a person, but still pretty cool otherwise. This game is also rather self-explanatory, focusing primarily on the assassination mission laid out in the opening cutscene. But before we get into that, let's talk about these new characters a bit. Starting with Hawken, since he makes less appearances in the games. Hawken, also known as Brother Hawken, is a high-ranking member of Vandir Lorday's court. Why he needs a court in the first place, I don't really know. What we do know about Hawken is a bit limited. We know he's an extremely prevalent warrior and likely served in the war against the rebellion, using a unique style featuring this little whip sword. I think it's pretty neat. Hawken has an obsessive hatred for Vandir Lorday, and isn't really motivated by a desire for justice or freedom like Ivana or the Lone Warrior. It's pretty obvious he wants to take the throne for himself, as he literally said out loud.
For when this is over, I will be king.
Other than that, his only major role was guiding and helping Ivana along the way. Oh hey, speaking of that lady we play as, let's talk about Ivana. It's pretty obvious right off the bat that she doesn't really want to go through with this like Hawken does, but gets pressured into it as she literally said out loud again.
Are you ready?
No, we shouldn't be using our power in this conduct. A lust for power will only destroy us. Is that not what matters?
What's wrong? Are you truly defending our masters?
Wow, this is getting really redundant. Anyways, Ivana serves as the protagonist of the game and the one we follow as she makes her way through the Imperial walls. She interrogates an elite who tells them the king is on Devil's Hill and thanks him by literally just slicing him in half. It's around here I should mention the actual nature of the creatures we fight in-game, because it is pretty important. Throughout the first game, pretty much all of our enemies have been soldiers, maybe the occasional elite here and there, but Red Moon introduces these bizarre goblin monster type things that don't really look even remotely human. It seems a bit weird that these things would just be here out in the wild, but as I'll discuss when reviewing the ending cutscene, I believe there's something more to that. Anyways, Ivana makes her way through all that menagerie and ends up coming to the peak of the hill, finally confronting Vandir Lorday. Surely, with this newfound power of the Red Moon and Hawken by her side, she'll be able to take down the king and usurp the kingdom for herself, right? Oh me, oh my. Things don't go to plan, as it's revealed Vandir himself is a red samurai. What is a red samurai? Well, what does all that mean? Basically, they're people who become superhuman under the light of the red moon. Issue is, Vandir is already basically a demigod, as we got to see in Armed with Wings 1. So basically, the playing field is leveled once again. Things go about as well as you would expect. Okay, jokes aside, things don't go according to plan. Before Ivana and Hawken can get sliced into dust, they're interrupted by a certain unfamiliar visitor. Network. An as of yet unseen face who stops Vandir in his tracks. Now, it's a bit hard to read their reactions considering one of them doesn't seem to have a face and the other one is wearing a big-ass mask, but one thing is clear, he's not here to defend Hawken. My theory is that this was intended to be a meeting of some sorts that was unceremoniously interrupted by Hawken and Ivana, which would explain why the king is here in the first place. I mean, it's a hill in the middle of nowhere. It would also explain the bizarre monsters we've been seeing along the way, which, as we learn later, these creatures are spawn of pure evil that are the product of Network's influence. Badly injured and disgraced from their royal positions, Hawken and Ivana flee the scene to hide and recover. Things end on a sort of downer note, with the two apologizing to each other and going into hiding, having the unintended benefit of being out of the metaphorical line of fire as of the events of the first game. Now that we're caught up, it's time to get into the second, and possibly my favorite, entry into the series. Armed with Wings 2, by far my most played entry into the series, follows the freshly disgraced king after his incident. Armed with Wings 2 has a lot more platforming action than the first, and follows a much more mobile Vandir Lorde, going on his quest for the 4 Blades of Eden to put a permanent end to the Lone Warrior. Wow, that sure was a lot of words I just said. Let's start from the beginning. We pick up immediately after the events of Armed with Wings. Vandir has been beaten to a pulp, his empire has been usurped, and now he has to make an escape from the confines of his own palace, guided by an elite who... Oh, okay, there he goes. Never mind. After beating the fuck out of his own men, whom all seem to have turned on him due to the new ruling, Vandir eventually comes face to face with a familiar, well, face. Quema Tormenta, one of the generals he killed earlier. The fact that this man was killed over 5 years ago and is standing in front of him, trying to kill him, comes as a shock. Despite, you know, being beaten to a pulp by a dude he supposedly killed. Either way, the path is clear, and Vandir makes a bit of an unexpected stop. After his escape, Vandir visits an old friend in hopes of forging an alliance to reclaim his throne. Håkon and Ivana are shocked to find that not only is Vandir Lorde, well, here, but that he seemingly knew the location of their hiding spot this whole time, but simply refused to finish them off for one reason or another. But that's not what he's here about. Vandir mentions the Blades of Eden, a set of magic swords that, in his own words, simply destroy Black Mist, and that any who suffer from a cut from all four will simply cease to be. Essentially, they're divine tools capable of completely destroying someone instead of just, dispersing them. The issue is that you need to have all four of them for this ability to be used, and interesting little side note that I'm not sure is intentional, but the Blades of Eden don't really look like, well, blades at all. They look like they were never really meant to be used by a person in the first place. Most people think the swords were created by Network, as they fit his ideals perfectly. But personally, I have my own theory. Remember these guys? The still image of them that I flashed on the screen for literally less than a second? This thing, I'm just gonna call it the Council, is the living embodiment of Black Mist, the will of all things made manifest. Personally, I believe it's the creator of the Blades of Eden for a couple of reasons. First off the bat is the elemental nature of them. The Blades of Eden aren't like swords of darkness or evil or something. If they were meant to be a gift for Vandir, why wouldn't they be something like, ice, his main ability or something, assuming Network knew about him at that time. Ignoring the elemental mismatch, the other thing that stands out to me is if such a power were truly being created by Network, then why is it that, in Armed with Wings 3, he lacks the ability to completely destroy Black Mist? Why is it that he had to imbue it onto these swords if he couldn't do it himself? Okay, enough about that. I'm kind of rambling a bit. Let's get back on topic. As Vandir describes his attack to the outcasts, he mentions that the Blades of Eden can, in fact, as stated previously, destroy Black Mist. But of course, there's this asshole who will totally never be important later again. He won't help us unless Vandir shows him one of the actual swords, to prove it exists. Fortunately, Vandir wasn't joking. With the Blade of Water in hand, Vandir goes off to find the Blade of Wind, which looks like fried shrimp. Yum! So while I suck ass at this platforming section, let's talk about Network a bit. It's pretty evident that the demon is essentially tailing Vandir throughout the events of the game, despite never really being seen. We know that according to the Lone Warrior, he and the King are closer to allies than enemies, considering Network appears literal moments after his encounter near the end of the game. It's likely he was simply waiting for the fight to be over so he could intervene. Anyways, we make our way to the temple and encounter Veluzodon dingoes, and of course, hilarity ensues. After beating the living hell out of him, Vandir attempts to interrogate him and get some answers out of this, but ends up getting pretty much the same answer he got from Quemo Tormenta. Our master can control Black Mist. It's as simple as that. You'd think by now he'd be able to put two and two together and realize that he's picking a fight with literally God, but of course, Vandir remains stubborn. This is his kingdom after all, and he wants it back. So we continue on our way. Next stop, Fuego Mountain, or Fire Mountain, or, just a volcano. There's not really much to say about this part of the game, more or less just serves the same role as Gusty Valley. Eventually, after slaughtering a ton of people, including former elites, we come face to face with Smoking Martillo, and teach him valuable lessons on the dangers of lung cancer. Oh yeah, and pissing off Vandir Lorde. And just like that, the Blade of Fire is ours. On his way back from the expedition, Vendir is greeted by Ivana, who seems genuinely panicked, talking about Brother Hawken and... Yikes. Hawken taunts Vendir before making a break for it, leaving the king alone with only his heavily injured companion. Infuriated and betrayed, Vendir makes a brief detour from his quest for the Blade of Lightning to beat the fucking brakes off of Hawken. His betrayal wasn't entirely unforeseen, but his rage is amplified, as it could not have been at a worse possible time. Surrounded by the strongest mercs Hawken can muster and wandering blindly into hostile territory, somehow the king prevails against all odds. After a short segment, Vendir confronts Hawken, demanding to know where the Blade of Lightning is. Unfortunately for him, Hawken isn't willing to budge. His newfound betrayal is no longer motivated by hatred or selfishness, or of a desire to become king himself, but out of a genuine desire to do the right thing. In the words of Michael Enslin,
I've lived the life of a selfish man, but I don't have to die that way.
he's seen the light and refuses to fight against the very will of Black Mist any longer, forcing him and Vendir to cross blades once again. Of course, it doesn't exactly go as planned, though, as Hawken is once again brought to his knees by the wrath of the king. And once again, he tells Vendir pretty much the same thing. The lone warrior can control Black Mist, and the Blade of Lightning is either so impossibly hidden that there's not a chance in hell Vendir could find it, or worse, it's completely destroyed. Having enough of his former student's nonsense, he executes Hawken as he should have done a long, long time ago. Now, without any form of plan, and having to rely on the means he already has, he presses forward to confront the lone warrior once again. After all, their battle was close last time, and with his newfound power and pretty sweet sword, he's bound to have more, at least a chance. At least he thinks so, anyway. And here he is, waiting for the ex-king at the peak of this little arena, and... You know what? I don't really think my build-up can do this bit justice. So let's just... yeah. Well, that was one hell of a fight. Finally, Vendir struck his opponent down. Yippee, right? Turns out it was all a fairy tale, and Vendir can continue his role like nothing happened. Oh, wait. Speaking through the lone warrior, Black Mist itself confronts Vandir. It claims to give life to the righteous and favors men of peace. And Vandir is anything but a man of peace, sealing him away for all eternity in this little white room, letting the world continue in peace without him. Whew, I mean, what an ending. I mean, the first game had an awesome climax, but this is probably my favorite ending in the entire series. I personally believe that Armed with Wings 2 is pretty much the perfect example of taking the protagonists from the first game and making them into the antagonists of the second game, without butchering or even really so much as altering the character as a whole. The whole way through your journey, you can see the sheer ignorance that Vandir shields himself with, not really willing to come to terms with the idea that maybe, just maybe, there are forces outside of his control that are pretty unhappy with his ruling. All of this perfectly sealing away the High King, allowing for the people of Black Mist to return to a more peaceful life and leave the horrors of his empire behind. For now. Armed with Wings 3, the biggest and buggiest. Oh, come the fuck on! Of the Armed with Wings 3 series. Armed with Wings 3 primarily centers around Leo, the prodigy child of Ivana, putting the series at least a decade, or most likely more, after the events of Armed with Wings 2. But that's not where we start. Oh no. Things are a bit more interesting than that. This is Network. Teased that in earlier entries such as Red Moon and pretty much just Red Moon. We don't know what he is, who created him, or even if Network is his real name. What we do know is that he's here with a very simple mission: free the king. Unfortunately, he has a bit of a hurdle to jump through if he's gonna do this, that being just literally the god. Despite being strong enough to easily imprison the new and improved Vandir Lorde, Armed with Wings isn't actually strong enough to easily wipe out Network. Emphasis on easily. The two end up coming to blows, with both the Lone Warrior and Network being completely drained. Yet despite what these here subtitles might say, they aren't completely destroyed. The Lone Warrior was robbed of his power of being armed with wings, while Network was reduced to a shriveled husk of his former self. We don't know exactly what this entails, but even after a few human sacrifices, he looks like, this. So it's safe to assume he's not doing so hot. Fast forward a little over a dozen years or so, and finally we're brought back up to Leo.
Thank fucking God.
Leo, like I said, is Ivana's son. It's emphasized that he was essentially a miracle birth, as it's not really clear how Ivana got pregnant. We at least know for a fact that he is not Hawken's son, no matter what some of you dirty little gremlins in the comments section might think.
You are a fast mover. Please have a seat right there.
Leo is living pretty peacefully with his mother and a few other village goers in the long-forgotten bones of the Empire. Vandir's shadow has now been reduced to little more than a fading memory for most people. We see that Leo has found himself in a comfortable life of monster hunting and being a relatively talented fighter even before his formal training, and that, more importantly, he's had enough of this shit! Leo ends up getting word from his mother that more and more of these dark creatures have been spotted around the outskirts of the village, and Leo takes to the forest trails to investigate. Along the way, he encounters this guy, who looks oddly familiar. Well, Leo deals with him pretty easily and meets back up with Ivana, who... demonstrates that the monsters will only truly die if they dissipate, something that was established in Armed with Wings 1. Of course, the whole intro chapter is basically just a red herring, because once they get back to the village, they encounter the first real bad guy of the game, Gaz. Gaz is a big fat loser. Gaz is a big fucking... Gaz is a big angry warlord who's after the residents of the village for whatever reason. He gets into an altercation with Gaz trying to defeat Ivana, and this happens.
Now you done it. You won't like Doc when he's angry.
Unfortunately, even though Leo is undoubtedly a decent fighter, he lacks training and discipline. Thankfully, a guy with just the best mustache you've ever seen. I mean, just look at it. Beautiful. Is kind enough to teach him more advanced karate so he can properly fend for himself. So, you know, that doesn't happen again. After a bit, Leo arrives in Gaz's stronghold, which for an Armed with Wings game is honestly kind of a refreshing sight. Buildings that aren't in ruin, actual soldiers with new outfits. It's a little bizarre to see a new empire being built so far disconnected from Vandier's empire. It just, I don't know, it doesn't feel right. And honestly, I think that's the point, given the music, too. After all that good stuff, eventually Leo comes face to face with good old Gaz once again. The two don't really talk much, and their fight isn't really anything insane, mainly just acts as foreshadowing for a certain special boy. As I beat the living fuck out of this guy, let's talk about what exactly Gaz is trying to accomplish. We don't really know exactly why, but Gaz has been gathering human sacrifices to bring to the now weakened network, intending to bring the demon back to his full strength again. Gaz mainly goes after people of pure heart, hence him targeting random villagers and, more notably, Ivana. Speaking of which... yeah, we're just gonna keep our distance for now. Back at home, Leo and Ivana get the, brilliant idea to track down everybody's favorite corrupt and diabolical king and set him free in hopes that Vandir will somehow take out Network. I mean, hey, what's the worst that could happen, right? I feel as if I might be a tiny bit underprepared for this. Oh, fucking God! After all, there's always the great Armed with Wings at the ready to put the king back in his prison if need be. At least, that's the goal. Ah well, Leo gets a snazzy new sword and some words of encouragement before heading off to Frosted Peaks to let Vandir out of the literal box they put him in last time. A whole lot of platforming, monster slaying, and kind of raging later, Leo comes to the very same peak Vandir and the Lone Warrior fought upon. And thankfully, Ivana is already there. They talk to the, in Leo's words, this unusually still man, where it is finally revealed that the once great Armed with Wings is simply no more, and has now been reduced to a simple lone warrior. He pretty quickly shuts down the idea of letting Vandir out, stating that Network and Vandir are closer to allies than rivals. It sounds like they've got a plan, though, before everybody's favorite godlike horror shows up. Yeah, things aren't looking super great for Leo. After Vandier's arbitrary 30 seconds are up, thankfully the lone warrior steps in and stops Vandier from killing a literal child, relying on everybody's favorite spell, box summoning. From there, the three make a run for it, and by the time Vandier and Network break free, they're long gone. Regrouping back at the village, Leo meets with his mother and everybody's favorite unusually still man, who casually drops the bombshell that Leo is going to become the next Armed with Wings. Just, out of nowhere, out of the blue, as one does. Supposedly, this is because of the miracle of Leo's conception, lending credence to the whole Jesus metaphor going on throughout the series, but that's neither here nor there. Filled with newfound confidence and Renji Abarai's sword from Bleach for some reason, Leo sets off with a lone warrior in direct pursuit of the king. Despite getting his ass absolutely handed to him earlier, Leo's confident enough to put himself back in harm's way, and sets off with the lone warrior to commit regicide. Entering into the bones of the Empire, Leo is basically going to have to deal with the most adversity he's faced yet. And despite the king's ruling being pretty much just a faded memory, his disheveled empire is still regularly populated with archers, former soldiers, weird monsters, and these things. Yo dog, I heard you like loud noises. From here, we really get to see the sheer fucking scale Vandier's empire was really on. Sure, this place is in ruin and feels more like a bandit's nest than an empire, but we can see that it wasn't exactly your average farming village. The empire was massive, stretching out with vast walls and elaborate structures like skyscrapers, now left as bare walls and broken arches. After some of the longest levels in the game, Leo finally makes it to the summit, only to find Vandier isn't exactly hanging out in his former throne room, but is instead just sorta chilling out in the middle of nowhere, I guess. As per usual with this game, the lone warrior has pretty much already beaten Leo to the punch. Vandier Lordet isn't really hiding himself and is basically just waiting for them. Vandier and the lone warrior share some interesting words, and he fucks right off, and our boy follows, leaving Leo alone.
Was it supposed to do that?
Well, mostly alone. Unnerved and isolated, Leo moves forward and... yeah, that's a thing. Once again, this creature isn't really directly connected and is one of the many awful creatures presumably created by Network. Speaking of which, this whole battle essentially serves as a giant distraction for Leo so Network can get to Ivana. But before we get into the details of what happens to Ivana and Leo, we have a certain loose end to wrap up. After having a fucking conniption! The lone warrior abandons Leo in direct pursuit of Vandier Lordet. It's pretty obvious he's trying to recapture his own glory in some bloody pursuit, mainly fueled by rage. Issue is, Vandier doesn't really see him in the same way. What was once a terrifying god amongst men set on tearing him a new one is now just... well, I mean, it's kind of in the name. He's just a lone warrior, basically treating him the same as he did in Armed with Wings 1, before his resurrection, of course. To be honest, I'm kind of at a loss for words here. There's not a whole lot to say about the plot of Culmination, short of the dialogue between these two.
Oh my god, bro. Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck, man?
Comedy gold aside, it's pretty obvious the dynamic has essentially completely reversed, with Vandier being honestly kind of a prick and talking down to the lone warrior, angrily chasing him through Network's lesser monsters to try and catch him, jumping across gaps, cutting monsters to ribbons, and enduring through the rotten scraps of this dead empire, before finally coming to this bizarre point. Another classic arena to clash swords with, except this time, much like the journey itself, even here the dynamic itself has been reversed. Now, if you're anything like me, your first reaction was probably this. Wait, what the fuck? What the fuck? Aw, come the fuck on! Are you kidding me? Ignoring that pretty embarrassing clip, we end up taking control of Vandir during this fight and get to learn a whole new moveset. Neat. One small issue though. And before you say anything about it in the comments, yes, I know that in hard mode you end up controlling the lone warrior in this fight, but the outcome is essentially the same. The fight ends in disappointment, with Vandir getting his revenge properly by cutting him down and leaving him here to die alone. It's a grim ending, to say the least, and the tone of the game is kind of leading up to that. I mean, the music sounds like something you'd hear during a funeral. The hints of color once seen in Armed with Wings 3 are pretty much gone, as this setting takes place in the ruins unpopulated by anything human. If you played through Armed with Wings 3 though, you know that the situation is anything but hopeless. Speaking of which, let's get back into it. After that uniquely depressing detour, we get to see what Leo's been up to this whole time. Spoiler alert, it's not a whole lot better. That god-awful monster Leo was left with, combined with Vandir leading the lone warrior away, was just a ruse, a big fat distraction so Network could get his hands on one of the last truly pure souls around here. After effectively murdering everybody Leo loves and cares about, except for Mr. Blacksmith, he's always there for you, Network takes his leave, and of course, our boy follows. Chasing him through what I can only assume is the wreck of the arena from Armed with Wings 2, Leo tracks Network down. The fight is pretty intense, but it's obvious Leo has the upper hand here, not really elaborating on the reason for his newfound power, although it's pretty obvious what's going on, given some less than subtle connotations. After flipping his shit, Network gets pissed at Leo's newfound godlike strength and comes to the natural conclusion that we pretty much already knew. Leo is armed with wings, and with the power of Black Mist, intends to wipe out this evil for good. Unfortunately for him, Network has a champion of his own, everybody's favorite deranged tyrant, Vandir Lord Day, forcing Leo to cross swords with the man yet again. This is it, the final confrontation of the entire series. Leo, the newly reborn Armed with Wings, and the disgraced King Vandir Lord Day, backed by the godlike powers of Network. And in contrast to how things went in culmination, things don't go so well for the King this time around. By then, Black Mist has essentially already made its conclusion. Even when sealed, the king was nothing but a menace, attracting evils of all sorts, and thus, Black Mist himself has deemed him unworthy of the life he so liberally wasted. That concludes the Armed with Wings series. that was certainly a lot to unpack. Just to make sure you guys got everything, let's do a quick little summary, so everybody's caught up. 5 years prior to the events of Armed with Wings, the lone warrior leads a rebellion against the tyrannical King Vandir Lorde with the assistance of 3 generals, all of whom were slain in combat during the rebellion. 2 high-ranking nobles of Vandir's throne plot to rebel against him and, on the night of the Red Moon, follow through with their plans. Unfortunately, Vandir proves to be far stronger than both of them combined, and during the fight, Ivana is mortally wounded. Not only does she survive her injuries, but finds herself pregnant with a boy who would later be named Leo. Eventually, the lone warrior returns from the grave, armed with the power of Black Mist itself, and sets off to slay the king once and for all. After getting his ass handed to him, Vandir makes a run for it and goes to collect the 4 Blades of Eden, in hopes of putting the lone warrior down permanently. After being forced to work with ex-assassin Hawken, after retrieving the Blade of Fire, Hawken stabs Vandir in the back once again, and hides/possibly destroys the Blade of Lightning, forcing Vandir to fight the lone warrior with an incomplete arsenal. Against all odds though, he manages to overpower him and defeat the lone warrior, but is shocked when he reveals himself to be the one known as Armed with Wings. Speaking through the voice of Black Mist himself, he seals Vandir away in a white room, presumably for all of eternity. At least that was the intention. Moments later, he is attacked by the Great Demon Network in an attempt to free Vandir, but is, moments later, unsuccessful. Even though he was able to take down Armed with Wings with him, leaving the lone warrior without a majority of his divine powers. From here, we follow Leo, who is presumably a teenager at this point, living with his mother in the villages that have cropped up after the fall of the Empire. Leo goes and tries to investigate the recent spike in monster attacks, only for his village to be attacked by Gaz, who attempts to sacrifice his people, including Leo's mother, to Network, in hopes of bringing him back to his prime. From there, Ivana gets the idea to go and free the king and sets off with Leo. The lone warrior stops them, but Network ends up doing the deed anyway. The lone warrior and Leo set off shortly after to try and hunt down and exterminate his majesty, in the bones of his former empire. Unfortunately, this ends up being more of a wild goose chase, as when they get there, Vandir ends up leaving anyway, with a big monster for Leo to deal with. While Leo is busy fighting that thing and making his way back home to his mother, the lone warrior gets thrown into a rage and tries to hunt Vandir down. It doesn't really work out though, as without the divine power of being armed with wings, Vandir is simply too strong and ends up cutting him down anyway. Leo, meanwhile, ends up finding his mother, but is a bit too late, as Network kills her, as well as leaving Leo completely alone, except for Blacksmith Guy. By then, though, Leo has effectively realized his true power and sets off to bring Network to justice, being well and truly armed with wings. Network doesn't really stand much of a chance, and in a last act of desperation, he imbues his power with Vandir Lorde, although even this isn't enough. And so, Leo finally strikes the king down and cleanses the world of the stain that is the evil Vandir Lorde has left, as the new Armed with Wings. Well, that was certainly a lot. Thanks for sticking around, by the way, boys. I know this video has been in the works for a while, and I haven't really posted in forever. I haven't really felt the desire to. I don't know. I haven't really felt YouTube as much as I used to. I started working on the script for this video, like 4 or 5 weeks ago now. Progress has been pretty slow, mainly because I've been working on other stuff like writing, books, and lore summaries, things like that. I've also been working and getting into a new career path and stuff, but more importantly, I've been trying to get ready for a trip to Brazil that's coming up this summer that I'm honestly kind of nervous about. Thank you guys for sticking around and watching until the end. It really does mean a lot to me that people actually care about the things that I make and are willing to stick around and hear me out, you know? Oh yeah, and as a little extra reward for sticking around, I got some bloopers while I was recording the ending footage here. Just some funnies between me and Talon is all. Alright, see you around, boys. Enjoy. Fucked. Get fucked, Van Dork! Oh, you got me. Why do I have a hawk? Why am I white?
Don't run away from me.
You smell. Dance. You can't dance like I can.
I can dance if I want to.
You can leave your friends
Behind. Your friends don't dance, and if they don't dance, well, they're no friends of mine! We can go where you want to. We got all your life in mind. And if your friends don't dance, and if they don't dance, well, they're no friends of mine! It's so fucking stupid.
Na 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 na
Oh my god! Oh fuck.
da 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 This guy doesn't get hacked up. Okay, Vampire Strike is obviously overpowered.
It's fucking. I can't even with this shit.